Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are conducting a forensic analysis of a vegetable. And I know how that sounds. It sounds like potentially the driest possible way to spend an hour. But this particular vegetable, it has, I think, the strangest career arc of any food in modern history.
It really does. It's a comeback story, honestly. But it wasn't even there to make a comeback from.
That's the thing. It is. Because if you rewind the clock, 15, maybe 20 years, this plant, it basically didn't exist in the human diet. It was, the stuff they packed around the watermelon at the Sizzler salad bar to make the ice look less depressing. It was purely structural. It was a garnish.
It was decorative greenery. That was its job. Nobody ate it. In fact, there's a pretty well-known statistic that prior to, say, 2010, the single largest purchaser of kale in the entire United States was Pizza Hut.
No way.
Yes. And they used it exclusively for salad bar decoration. It was perfect for the job. It's durable. It holds its shape under the lights for days, and it covered the gaps between the actual food.
And then it feels like it happened almost overnight. The PR machine just turned on.
It ignited it.
Suddenly it's in smoothies. It's massaged into salads with, lemon juice and tahini. It's baked into these chips that cost $8 for a tiny bag. It became the absolute poster child for wellness.
The icon.
Yeah. But whenever something swings that hard, from garnish to god-tier superfood, my alarm bells just start screaming.
As they should. I mean, whenever marketing moves faster than the science, you get distortion. That's almost a universal law.
Right. Because usually that gap, that delta between the reality and the marketing, that's where the scams live. So our mission today is to completely ignore the influencers. I don't care about the aesthetic smoothie bowls on Instagram. I want to know, strictly looking at the clinical literature, is this stuff actually doing anything exceptional to the human body? Or is it just really, really good marketing by Big Kale?
It's a valid skepticism. It really is. And to answer that question, we have to filter our sources and filter them aggressively. So for this deep dive, we are completely tossing out the Petri dish studies. I am not interested in what some kale extract does to a rat or, a cell culture in a beaker.
We want human data.
Strictly human data and recent human data. We've pulled a stack of recent randomized controlled trials, RCTs, some systematic reviews, and meta-analyses. Some of this data is, it's hot off the press. From 2024, we're going to look at type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular hydraulics, the microbiome, and this is the really fascinating part, the actual chemistry of how you cook the thing.
So the core question is, if I eat this, what physically changes in my biology? What's the bottom line?
Well, the answer is surprisingly complex. The data strongly suggests that kale acts as a biological sponge for cholesterol and as a kind of mechanical brake for blood sugar.
A spun and a brake.
I like that. But, and this is really the headline of this entire deep dive, it acts like a binary chemical weapon. It only works if you trigger it correctly. If you just, say, boil it, you are essentially destroying the payload. You're diffusing the bomb.
Wait, hold on. That is a massive claim. You're telling me that for years I might have been cooking this supposed superfood into just inert roughage.
If you've been boiling it, yes.
Yeah.
100%. You might as well just drink the cooking water and throw the actual leaves in the compost.
Well, that is deeply depressing. Okay, but before we get to the cooking protocols, and I know we have a whole section on that later, I really want to understand what we are actually eating. Biologically speaking, what is this plant? Because, it just looks like lettuce that went to the gym and got really angry.
That is actually not a bad description at all. Biologically, kale is Brassica oleracea variety acephala.
Acephala, what does that mean?
It's Latin for without a head. So you think about a cabbage or an iceberg lettuce, they grow into a tight, closed ball.
Right.
A head.
Sure.
That head protects the inner leaves from the sun, from pests, from the wind. It's a little fortress. Kale's a non-heading cabbage. Some people think it's more primitive.
Yeah.
It lets its leaves hang out in the open, totally exposed to the sun and all the elements.
And does that exposure actually matter? Or is it just a shape preference?
Oh, it matters immensely. It's the whole story. Because those leaves are constantly being blasted by harsh sunlight and nibbled on by pests, the plant has to produce massive amounts of defense chemicals and natural UV protection. That's the nutrient density everyone talks about. A tightly bound cabbage leaf is pale and white because it never sees the sun. A kale leaf is dark green and tough because it is literally in a constant fight for its life against the elements.
Just the stress on the plant is what creates the nutrition for us.
Exactly. The stress is the source of the medicine, and there are really three main pillars to this nutritional architecture.
Okay, what are they?
First, you have the vitamins. And we won't bore everyone with a huge list, but the vitamin K content is just staggering. I mean, truly staggering. 100 grams of kale, that's a decent-sized bunch, contains about 390 micrograms of vitamin K1.
And what's that in, like, daily value terms?
That is over 300% of your daily value.
Wow. Okay, so that is a huge load.
It's an atomic bomb of vitamin K. So that's pillar 1. Then you have pillar 2, the carotenoids, specifically lutein and beta-carotene. These are the pigments that give it that deep green color, but in our bodies, they act as powerful antioxidants.
Right, I've heard of those, especially for eye health.
Precisely. We'll get to that. But the third pillar, this is the one we really need to focus on today. This is the medicine. This is the family of compounds called the glucosinolates.
Glucosinolates. Okay, that sounds like a chemical preservative.
It's actually a sulfur-containing compound. It's what gives it that slightly bitter, cabbagey taste. But here's the major plot twist. Glucosinolates, on their own, are biologically inactive.
What?
They don't do anything. They just sit there in the plant cell, totally inert.
Wait a minute, I thought this was the super compound. You're telling me it's a dud.
It's a dud until it is activated. Think of a kale leaf like a 2-part epoxy, or maybe better analogy is a binary chemical weapons.
Okay, I'm with you.
In one compartment of the plant cell, you have the glucosinolates. That's the payload. In a separate, completely sealed-off compartment, you have an enzyme called myrosinase.
Myrosinase, okay. So they're neighbors, but there's a wall between them.
A very strong wall, correct. As long as the plant is alive and happy and just sitting in the field, they never touch.
Yeah.
But imagine a caterpillar comes along and takes a big bite.
Crunch.
It breaks the cell walls. The payload, the glucosinolates, suddenly floods out and mixes with the enzyme, the myrosinase.
And the reaction starts.
Instantly. The enzyme hydrolyzes the glucosinolates and creates a brand new, highly volatile compound called an isothiocyanate, or more specifically in the case of kale and broccoli, sulforaphane.
And sulforaphane. That's the good stuff. That's the name I've heard.
Sulforaphane is the magic. To that caterpillar, it's a powerful deterrent. It tastes incredibly bitter. It burns. It's what we call the mustard bomb.
A mustard ball.
That spicy, sharp kick you get from arugula or mustard greens or horseradish. That is the chemical warfare activating in your mouth.
Wow.
But in the human body, that very same compound triggers a massive upregulation of our own antioxidant systems. It flips a switch called NRF2, which turns on hundreds of our own internal detoxification pathways.
So if I'm understanding this right, the medicine isn't actually in the plant when you pick it.
Not in its active form, no.
The medicine is created in the moment of destruction.
Precisely. You have to damage the plant to make the medicine work. If you could somehow swallow a kale leaf whole without breaking a single cell wall, you'd get very little benefit. You have to chew it, you have to chop it, you have to blend it to mix those two chemicals.
That is absolutely fascinating. We are essentially hacking a plant's self-defense mechanism for our own benefit.
That's all nutrition is, really.
But this brings us right back to the huge warning you gave at the top of the show. If the enzyme, this myrosinase, is required to mix with the payload, what happens if I cook the kale?
Enzymes are proteins, and proteins are very sensitive to heat. If you cook the kale to death before you chop it, or if you, say, blanch it at a high heat immediately after harvesting, you denature the enzyme. You kill it.
So if I kill the enzyme first and then I eat the kale.
You have the payload, the glucosinolates are still there, but you have no spark plug. There's no trigger. They just pass right through your system, largely unactivated.
So you're getting the fiber, you're getting some of the vitamins, but you are not getting the magic.
You are not getting the mustard bomb. You've disarmed it.
That reframes the entire discussion on how to prep this vegetable. Okay, hold on. Let's put a pin in the cooking axe because I know we have a whole section dedicated to that later. I want to look at the so what first.
The clinical reality.
Right, because mechanism is one thing. It should work is a very different claim from it does work. You mentioned diabetes and blood sugar. This seems to be where some of the strongest recent data is.
It is, without a doubt. And for this, we need to talk about a study that was just published in 2024 by Jeppesen and colleagues. This is a big deal in the nutrition world, not just for the results, but for the methodology.
Why is this one standing out from the pack?
Because of the rigor. This was a 12-week randomized controlled trial, the absolute gold standard of evidence, and it was done in patients with type 2 diabetes.
So not healthy college students.
Exactly. These weren't healthy 20-year-olds. These were people with established metabolic dysfunction, people who were actively managing a chronic disease.
Okay. And what did they have these people do? Just eat more kale?
They put them on a very specific high kale intervention. But the dosing is what really caught my eye, and I think it'll catch yours. They had the participants consume 78 grams of freeze-dried kale powder daily.
78 grams of powder.
Powder, yes. Okay, hang on. Let's do some napkin math here. Fresh kale is mostly water. If you freeze-dry it, you're removing, what, 90+% of the weight? So 78 grams of powder is...
That's a lot of fresh kale.
It's equivalent to about 341 grams of fresh kale.
341 grams. A standard bag of kale from the grocery store is, what, 150 grams?
About that, yeah.
So you're talking about more than almost 3 entire bags of kale from the grocery store every single day.
It is a mountain of greens. This is what we call a pharmaceutical dose in nutrition research. This is not a side salad. This is an aggressive intervention using a vegetable as the primary therapeutic agent.
I mean, my first question is, did the patients actually stick to it? That just sounds miserable.
Compliance was surprisingly high, and I think that's because it was a powder. They can mix it into other things, soups, drinks, stews. It's easier than chewing through 3 bags of leaves.
Fair enough. So what happened? What were the results?
The results were what made everyone sit up and pay attention. After 12 weeks, the Kale group saw an average drop in their HbA1c of 1.4 percentage points.
Okay, now for the listener who doesn't track their blood work religiously, contextualize that. A drop of 1.4%, is that a lot?
It is astronomical. Let me put it this way. HbA1c is your average blood sugar over a 3-month period. It's the key marker for diabetes management. When a pharmaceutical company is testing a brand new billion-dollar diabetes drug, if they get a 1% drop in HbA1c, they are popping champagne bottles at headquarters. That is a blockbuster drug.
Ugh.
To get a 1.4% drop from a vegetable, that is profoundly powerful.
That is incredible. And this was strictly the kale. There were no other lifestyle changes mandated, like exercise or anything.
It was a controlled trial, so the goal was to keep all other variables as constant as possible. The primary difference was the kale. And they also saw statistically significant improvements in insulin resistance and even body weight. It really suggests that at these high doses, this plant effectively acts as a metabolic regulator.
But here's the skeptic in me again. 341 grams is completely unrealistic for 99.9% of people. I am not eating 3 bags of kale a day, and I don't know anyone who is.
Right.
Is there any data on, human-sized portions? Does a normal amount do anything?
That is a fair and crucial point. And yes, there is. We could look at a slightly older study from Kondo and colleagues in 2016. They looked at what we call the acute effect, meaning what happens right now, immediately after a single meal.
Okay, not the long-term average, but the immediate spike.
Exactly. They did a classic carb loading test. They gave participants a high-carbohydrate meal thing, a big bowl of white rice, sugary sauces, basically a glucose spike waiting to happen.
The standard American dinner?
Pretty much. But along with that meal, they gave them a much, much smaller dose of kale. About 7 to 14 grams of powder.
Okay, that's more like a tablespoon or 2. That's doable.
Exactly. Very manageable. And even at that small practical dose, they saw a significant suppression of the post-meal blood sugar spike.
So it flattened the curve.
It blunted the spike.
Yeah.
Both the Cmax, the highest point the glucose reached, and the AUC, which is the total area under the curve, were significantly lower. The glucose didn't shoot up as high, and it didn't stay up as long.
Okay, how is it doing that? Is that the sulforaphane again, turning on detoxification pathways?
In this case, probably not. This is likely a more mechanical, almost physical effect. Kale is incredibly fibrous. When you rehydrate all that fiber from the powder in your stomach, it dramatically increases the viscosity of your gut content.
Viscosity, so it thickens the slurry in there.
It gums up the works. It turns the liquid in your stomach and small intestine into a much thicker gel. That gel moves more slowly through your system. It creates a physical barrier that slows down the digestive enzymes trying to break down the rice into sugar, and it slows down the rate at which that sugar can touch the intestinal wall to be absorbed.
So it literally acts like a traffic jam for carbohydrates.
That is the perfect analogy.
Yeah.
It physically puts the brakes on carbohydrate absorption speed.
That is an incredibly practical takeaway. So if I'm going to eat, a pizza or a big bowl of pasta, having a kale salad first, or even just throwing a tablespoon of kale powder into the sauce, isn't just for the vitamins.
Not at all.
It's a functional strategy to stop that sugar from hitting my blood all at once and sending my insulin on a roller coaster.
Precisely. It turns a high glycemic meal into a more moderate glycemic meal. It's a buffer, a very effective one.
Okay, let's pivot. We've covered blood sugar. Let's talk about the heart. You mentioned earlier that kale acts as a cholesterol sponge. I love that visual. but I really want to know the mechanism. How does a leaf clean out my blood?
This is one of the coolest, most elegant mechanisms in nutritional biochemistry. And it brings us to a really important study by Kim and colleagues from 2008. They took a group of men who had hypercholesterolemia, clinically high cholesterol, and they had them drink 150 milliliters of kale juice every day for 12 weeks.
Okay, just juice. So was the fiber removed?
That's a great question. No, it was more of a whole leaf blend, so the pulp was still in there. And that's absolutely crucial because the fiber is the hero of this story. The fiber is the mechanic here.
Got it. So what were the results?
The results were stark. Their LDL, the so-called bad cholesterol, dropped by a very respectable 10%. But even more impressively, their HDL, the good cholesterol, rose by a massive 27%.
27%. Hold on. Doctors struggle to raise HDL with powerful medications. Statins don't even do that.
It's notoriously difficult to move the needle on HDL. Niacin can do it, but with a lot of side effects. To see a 27% increase from kale juice it's remarkable.
So what's happening? What is the sponge effect?
The mechanism is called bile acid sequestration.
Okay, let's break that phrase down. Bile acid sequestration. What are bile acids?
Your liver produces bile. Bile is that green fluid that helps you digest fats in your small intestine. To make bile, your liver's primary raw material is cholesterol. It pulls cholesterol out of your blood to manufacture it.
Okay, so liver takes cholesterol from the blood, turns it into bile. Simple enough.
Right. Now, you release that bile into your intestine to digest your lunch. And normally your body is extremely efficient. It's a great recycler. Once the bile has done its job emulsifying fats, about 95% of it is reabsorbed in the lower part of your intestine and sent right back to the liver to be used again.
So the liver doesn't need to make new bile very often because it just keeps getting the old stuff back.
Yep. Exactly. It's a closed-loop system. But this is where kale comes in and disrupts the process. The specific types of fibers in kale are uniquely shaped to bind to the bile acids in the gut. They grab onto them like a magnet or like a sponge. And because they're now bound to this indigestible fiber, the gut cannot reabsorb them.
So you eliminate them.
You poop them out. The kale fiber sequesters the bile acids and escorts them out of your body.
Okay, so we're flushing away the bile, but how does that lower my blood cholesterol?
Because the liver senses the drop. It has a feedback loop. It goes, wait a minute, my bile acid reserves are running low. I'm not getting my recycling back. So it has to synthesize a fresh batch. And to do that, it has no choice but to pull more LDL cholesterol out of your bloodstream to use as the building block.
It's like bailing water out of a boat. The kale keeps throwing the bile overboard, so the liver has to keep frantically pumping cholesterol out of the blood to refill the tank.
That is the perfect analogy. I'm stealing that one. And that continuous pumping action is what lowers your systemic cholesterol levels over time.
That is just wild. So physically, the kale is carrying the building blocks of cholesterol out of your body via the digestive tract.
Yes, and we're seeing this effect across multiple studies. There's another very recent one, the Vessel study from 2024, that looked at blood pressure as well. They found that older adults with mildly elevated blood pressure who were told to eat 300 grams of cruciferous veggies, including kale, every day dropped their systolic blood pressure by an average of 2.5 mmHg.
Now, 2.5 sounds pretty small. If my blood pressure is 140, dropping to 137.5 doesn't feel like a cure.
To an individual, it feels small. I get that. But you have to look at this like an epidemiologist or a public health official. On a population level, a 2.5-point drop shifts the entire bell curve of risk to the left. It translates to a very significant reduction in strokes and heart attacks across millions of people. It's a small nudge for one person, but a life-saving nudge for the population.
It's the cumulative advantage. Okay, so we've done blood sugar, we've done heart health. I want to touch on the gut and then the eyes before we get into the safety checks. Because you can't talk about fiber this much without talking about the microbiome.
True. They're intrinsically linked. And for this, we have a great pilot study from Nishimoto and colleagues published just last year in 2023. They looked at women with chronic constipation.
A classic demographic for fiber intervention studies.
Indeed. A captive audience, you might say. They gave them 14 grams of kale powder daily for 4 weeks. And, predictably, it increased stool frequency. Kale helps you go. That's not news.
Right. Fiber does what fiber does.
But the genomic analysis of their stool samples was the really interesting part. They sequenced the microbiome of these women before and after. And they saw a very specific and beneficial shift in the bacterial ecosystem. A particular bacteria called Ruminococcus novis decreased significantly.
Is that a bad guy?
It's often considered a pathobiont. It's associated with gut inflammation and is often found in higher levels in people with Crohn's disease or IBD. It's pro-inflammatory. You generally want less of it.
Okay, so it weeded out a bad guy. Did it plant any good guys?
It did. At the same time, a bacteria called Eubacterium elegans increased. And that one is a very beneficial bug that helps produce short-chain fatty acids like butyrate.
Right. Butyrate is fuel for our gut cells.
It's the primary fuel for the cells lining your colon. So what this shows is that kale acts as a selective fertilizer. It's what we call a prebiotic. You aren't just bulking the stool with inert fiber. You're actively gardening the ecosystem. You're weeding out the inflammatory types and selectively feeding the beneficial ones.
I love that image. You are weeding and seeding your gut garden. Now, quickly on the eyes. My mom always told me carrots were for eyes. Was she lying to me? Should it have been kale all along?
She wasn't lying. Carrots are good. But kale might actually be better. This comes from a study by Arnold et al. In 2013. They were looking at age-related macular degeneration, or AMD.
The leading cause of blindness in older adults, right?
Exactly. The macula is the very center of your retina. It's responsible for your sharp central vision, the vision you use for reading, recognizing faces, driving. The macula is protected by a layer of pigment made of lutein and zeaxanthin. You can think of this pigment as your internal sunglasses.
It filters the incoming light.
Specifically, it filters damaging high-energy blue light before it can hit the sensitive photoreceptors. The denser that pigment is, the better the protection. In this study, they gave participants a kale extract for just 4 weeks. And in that short time, they saw a significant increase in what they call macular pigment optical density, or MPOD.
So you can literally thicken your internal sunglasses by eating kale.
You can. The data is very clear on that. You are fortifying your eye's natural shield against degeneration. But, and this is a critical transition to our next big topic, lutein and zeaxanthin are fat-soluble carotenoids, meaning they only dissolve in fat. If you eat a big bowl of raw kale with just lemon juice or a fat-free vinegar dressing, no oil, no nuts, no avocado, you will absorb almost none of that lutein. It will slide right through your digestive tract unabsorbed.
So once again, you are eating expensive, useless fiber.
Exactly. To get the eye protection, to get the vitamin K we talked about earlier, you must pair it with a source of fat. It's non-negotiable.
Okay, that is a perfect segue. I want to get to the how-to, the practical guide. But first, we have to clear the air. Because I swear, whenever you mention kale online, someone jumps in the comments screaming about kidney stones or thyroids or how it's basically rat poison. Let's do a rapid-fire myth-busting session.
Let's do it. Fire away.
Myth number 1. Kale causes kidney stones because it's full of oxalates. True or false?
False. Emphatically false. This is a classic case of mistaken identity. People are confusing kale with spinach.
So spinach is the real culprit.
In the context of oxalates, yes, absolutely. Spinach is incredibly, unusually high in oxalates. We're talking over 600 milligrams per 100 grams serving. If you are prone to forming calcium oxalate kidney stones, spinach is a food you need to be very careful with.
And what's the number for kale?
Kale has about 17 milligrams, 1-7.
600 versus 17.
It's not even in the same sport. It's a rounding error compared to spinach. Even the world's leading kidney stone specialists, people like Dr. Frederick Koh from the University of Chicago, have gone on record saying it is nearly impossible for a normal person to eat enough kale to cause stones. You would have to be juicing 10 pounds of it a day, every day.
Okay, so that one is completely busted. Myth number 2. Kale destroys your thyroid. It contains goitrogens that cause goiters.
This one has a tiny kernel of truth to it, but it's been exaggerated to the point of absurdity. Cruciferous vegetables do contain compounds called goitrogens, specifically one called progoitrin. And in theory, in a petri dish, these can interfere with iodine absorption by the thyroid.
In theory, I hear the caveat in your voice.
In reality, the common varieties of kale that you buy at the store, the curly kale, the Lacinato, or Duno kale, have been bred to have levels of progoitrin that are effectively zero. They just don't produce much of it.
So where does this fear even come from?
It mostly comes from some older, more heirloom varieties, specifically Russian or Siberian kale. That's actually a different species, Brassica napus, not Oleracea. It does have higher levels. But even then, for a person who is iodine sufficient, which is most people in the developed world, you would have to eat kilograms of it raw every day to have even a theoretical issue. Plus, cooking deactivates the vast majority of goitrogens anyway.
So if you're even remotely worried, just cook it. And stick to the common variety.
Correct. For 99.9% of people, it's a non-issue.
Okay. Myth number 3, the interaction with warfarin or Coumadin.
This is not a myth. This is a very real, very important fact.
Okay, let's be clear on this one then.
Warfarin is a blood thinner. It works by blocking vitamin K recycling in the body, which reduces the production of clotting factors. Kale is, as we established earlier, a vitamin K atomic bomb. If you are on a stable dose of warfarin, and you suddenly eat a massive kale salad for the first time in a year, you can completely neutralize the drug's effect and put yourself at risk of a dangerous clot.
So patients on warfarin should just avoid kale entirely?
No, and that's the old advice. The modern advice from cardiologists is all about consistency. If you want to eat a cup of kale every single day, that's fine. Your doctor will see your blood work, your INR levels, and will dose your warfarin to match that consistent intake. The danger is volatility. Don't eat 0 kale one wink and then 5 pounds of it the next because you went on a health kick. That's what crashes your INR levels and makes your blood either too thick or too thin. Consistency is the only rule.
Got it. That's a crucial clarification. Okay, now for the part I've been waiting for. Let's get to the actionable part. The bioavailability hacks. We have this amazing chemical weapon, but we need the user manual. We already established that boiling is bad.
Boiling is a crime against nutrition. It's the worst thing you can do to kale.
Why specifically? What's the damage?
Because glucosinolates and also vitamin C are water-soluble. When you boil kale in a pot of water, those precious compounds leach out of the leaves and into the hot water. Studies show you lose anywhere from 50% to as high as 90% of the glucosinolate payload into the pot liquor.
So unless you drink the murky green water, you've lost the medicine.
You've lost it. You're just eating wet fiber.
So what's better? Sautéing, roasting?
Steaming is the gold standard. Multiple studies have shown it preserves the nutrients best. But interestingly, steaming actually improves one aspect. It gently cooks the fiber just enough to increase that bile acid binding capacity we talked about. Steamed kale is actually a better cholesterol sponge than raw kale.
But wait a minute, we have a paradox here. You said we need to chop the kale when it's raw to mix the enzyme with the payload.
Correct.
And you just said we want to steam it to improve the cholesterol binding.
Also correct.
But you also said that heat kills the enzyme. So how do we possibly win? How do you get both benefits?
We hack the chemistry. This brings us to hack number 1, which I call the chop and wait method.
Explain.
It's simple. You chop your raw kale, you let it sit on the cutting board at room temperature for at least 40 minutes before you cook it.
40 minutes? Why?
Because for those 40 minutes, the myrosinase enzyme is alive and it is active. It's furiously going to work, converting all those glucosinolates into the superpowered sulforaphane. Once the sulforaphane molecule is created, it is highly heat stable.
Oh, so you're letting the chemical reaction happen outside the pan on the cutting board?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You create the medicine first, then you cook it. You can then steam it, saute it, whatever you want. The enzyme will die in the heat, but it's already done its job. The medicine, the sulforaphane, survives the cooking process. You get the best of both worlds.
That is absolutely brilliant. But let's be real, I'm busy. I don't always have the foresight to plan dinner 45 minutes ahead of time. Sometimes I'm just throwing a bag of frozen kale from the freezer into a pan right now because I need to eat.
I get it. For those times, you need hack number 2, the mustard rescue.
The mustard rescue. I love these names.
If you are using frozen kale, which has been blanched during processing, meaning the enzyme is already dead, or if you just cooked fresh kale immediately without waiting, you have a pan full of the payload but no trigger.
Right, it's disarmed.
So you add a donor trigger, you add a pinch of something that has a live active myrosinase enzyme. The easiest source is raw mustard powder.
The stuff in the spice aisle.
Exactly. Mustard seeds are also cruciferous vegetables. They are packed with a very potent heat-stable form of myrosinase.
Ah.
So you cook your kale. Right before you serve it, you sprinkle maybe a quarter or half teaspoon of raw mustard powder over it and stir it in. You are adding the live enzyme back into the mix. It reactivates the sulforaphane production right there in the pan and in your mouth and stomach.
That is incredible. So just a little pinch of that yellow powder essentially brings the dead vegetable back to life, chemically speaking.
Chemically speaking, yes. It completely restores the potency. It's a game changer for anyone who uses frozen greens.
I am absolutely doing that from now on. Okay, and the final non-negotiable rule is the fat rule.
It is non-negotiable. Always pair your kale with a healthy fat. A drizzle of olive oil, some avocado, a handful of nuts or seeds. If you don't add fat, you simply do not absorb the vitamin K or the lutein for your eyes. End of story.
So to summarize this entire deep dive, kale isn't just a garnish. It's not just hype. It is a validated metabolic tool.
It is. The clinical evidence supports its role in lowering blood sugar, lowering cholesterol, beneficially shifting the gut microbiome, and protecting the eyes.
But only if we treat it right. Only if we follow the instructions. Steaming is king.
Yes.
Chop and wait if you can. Use the mustard powder rescue if you can't. And always, always eat it with fat.
That's the protocol. That's how you unlock the plant's potential.
You know, it's such a fundamental shift in mindset. We spend so much time obsessing over what to eat. Is it kale? Is it spinach? Is it keto? Is it vegan? But the research we've looked at today proves that how we prepare our food matters just as much, if not more.
Absolutely. The preparation is part of the medicine.
If you take a head of kale and you boil it to death and you eat it with no fat, you are eating expensive fiber. That's it. If you take that exact same head of kale and you chop it, let it sit, steam it, and toss it with olive oil, you are eating powerful medicine. The plant hasn't changed. The leaf is identical. But your strategy, your preparation, completely changed the biological outcome.
It's about engaging with your food as a complex biological system, not just as a line item on a calorie counting app.
I love that. So I guess the final thought is the next time you see that curly green garnish on a platter, maybe show it a little more respect. It's a sophisticated chemical laboratory just waiting to be activated.
Well said.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.
Be curious.